Thank you. Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. My name is Daniel.
Daniel, I'm Greg.
Greg, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And you are
This is my partner, Athena.
Athena. Nice to meet you as well. Please have a sit down.
Oh, thank you.
Are you an accounting major or?
Well, I did study it for a little bit, and for a while, it looks like good money, but I kind of got caught up in other stuff. Kind of brings me here now. I represent for a nonprofit organization called the Indigenous Agency for Indigenous Rights.
Okay.
And one thing we always run into is we always have like competing interests as far as like land or stuff like that, whether it be through the county or private ownership. And the one thing I often have seen is, especially when it comes to corporations that are coming in and like using clamshell kind of like setups to buy and purchase property through multiple. I guess the one thing I was trying to ask him as well. He's very insightful. Um, I guess is there any like legal protection for someone who would do accounting for like a company like that? Like like because I know he kind of brushed like briefly mentioned like a hush order or something that would happen if you're doing like the if you're an accountant and you're doing stuff for like the willingness to accept kind of like guideline for like how you write off those types of expenses for the company you're writing your doing the taxes for.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just wondering if there was like anything as far as like legally, like suppose someone were an accountant for a company
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing like a lot of pollution and they have to be the ones to do that through WTA that they have to fill out and form in. uh, would there be any like legal protections for an individual like that, or
Hmm.
I know they call them whistleblowers, but I just for the most part I guess
Protection from what the company is doing, or protection from their work as an accountant?
that's a good question. I would probably think the company.
Yeah, unless they are owners of the company,
Right.
um, then they aren't really responsible for the types of activities that the company engages in.
Right.
And so as the accountant, my job is to report financial information, make sure that it's accurate, make sure that the people that are entitled to see or learn about that information, they get it. They get it in a form that they can understand, um, and it's information that they can reasonably rely on.
Right.
And so as the accountant, when I've done that, I've sort of done my job. Now, how the company chooses to make its money, how it chooses to spend its money,
Right.
um, as the accountant, those are not things that I'm responsible for.
Right.
I, it's not that I would, could care less about it. It's just it's not something that the accountant controls.
Right.
I don't have any control over what the leaders of the organization decide they're going to do with their money, or how they're going to make any money, or anything like that. But I do have a responsibility to report that information.
Right.
If I'm not honest in doing that, then yes, I am going to be responsible, and there is no protection for that.
Right. Okay.
So you certainly have to be honest in the work that you do,
Oh yeah.
or otherwise you're going to get in trouble. Yeah.
I guess that one of the main things I always heard is that it can be pretty complicated being an accountant as far as like handling someone's expenses and knowing the types of taxes and stuff that involve that. I guess uh, I mentioned protection, I'm sorry if I'm kind of confusing right now. I'm just God, so much is going on.
And so you said that you are part of a nonprofit. Are you the executive director, or
Oh,
what's your role?
I'm the chief executive. Yes.
The chief executive of the nonprofit. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And are you a MSU Denver student as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's your major?
My major right now is definitely in psychology.
Psychology. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it's a lot.
Yeah, I
like,
bet.
well, but for the most part, for us, like, being that I also represent for this nonprofit here, it's been an interesting experience, kind of like getting to know people, how they interpret things, how they kind of see and go within those guidelines of what is already being presented as like a precedent in that way. And the one thing I always just kind of had a problem with myself as far as like accounting specifically is the WTA factor. And maybe it's under a different term. That's the way I had learned it. I guess it's like in quotations, willingness to accept, and it's something that companies and corporations have to do as far as like the guidelines for making ways for hush money, as far as like when their product pollutes or how much pollution it does, and that's how much you have to factor in, or how much a company or a corporation wants to throw anyway towards the pollution of their product. And apparently it all comes out through taxes, and that's what it is I had learned. And I don't know if it's under a different term, honestly. I just haven't picked it up in a long time.
I guess I'm not quite following you. The WTA, willingness to accept. So explain that to me again. I'm not following.
Yeah.
Completely.
No problem. I know I probably am speaking in different terms, not really used or anything. It's a willingness to accept. Apparently, it's something you do as an accountant for a company, as far as like calculating how much pollution is coming out of even the factory or the product that they're doing, and they kind of round it up into an estimate number to where the company throws money, however how much money, towards the pollution or towards damage costs, as far as like if their product does something to the consumer, that they have like money set aside essentially for the suits.
Oh, okay. Yes. That is so yes, part of the accountant's job would certainly be to try and get some sort of estimation
Right.
as to what future damages might be.
Right.
Yes, that would be the sort of thing that you would have to report, probably more for financial purposes than for tax purposes.
Right.
But that is the sort of thing you'd have to report. It kind of reminds me of, you're probably too young to remember this, but years ago, Ford Motor Company put out a car called the Pinto.
Oh, right.
And the Pinto, part of the problem with the Pinto was that it was designed such that the gas tank was in the back of the car. The gas tank was in the front of the vehicle.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely.
And so when they designed the vehicle, the engineers told them that based on where this gas tank is located, if this car is in an accident, it's going to kill the occupants.
Right.
Now, the question became, okay, well, what are the chances of a car being in an accident? Well, we can take a look at the accidents in the United States and sort of guess how many people are going to be in an accident. All right, if there are X number of people in the accident, how many people are going to die as a result? Well, we think if you have an accident, 50% of the people that are in an accident in this car are going to pass away.
Right.
And so as a result, this is going to cost you X amount of money if you decide to build this car. However, this car is so popular that you're going to make 5X. Right? So if you're going to make 5X and it's going to cost you 1X, then obviously the profit is 4X.
Right.
And so, part of the accountant's job is to take this information once the engineer gives it, once all the other people that have that kind of data, once they sort of give that information to the accounting team, then it's the accounting team's responsibility to give that information to the leaders and say, hey, these folks over here told us that you're going to make X amount of revenue. These people over here say that this car is going to cause lives.
Right.
These people over here say that if it causes lives, this is how much it's going to cost.
Right.
When we look at all of these numbers, this is the result. And so that's sort of what the accountant does. And so from the accountant's perspective, it's not our decision as to whether or not you should build a Pinto.
Right.
That's not our decision. But what we can tell you is what all of these other folks are saying and what the financial consequences of that are. We can give you that information. And so this is, kind of the same with the pollution piece, is that, we know that if you have a plant and you are in the business of manufacturing this product, we know that manufacturing this product is going to create risk to 2 million people over here if you do it. If you do it and it creates this risk to these 2 million people, we can tell you what that's going to cost you. And then you, as the leadership, you decide what you want to do. Right? It's not our job to decide what you want to do, but it is our job to make sure that all this information is given to people who need to know.
Right.
And that's and so that's primarily the accountant's role.
Is there a specific term for that? Like, I know I have WTA, but I could be like kind of behind.
Is there a specific term? I can't really think of a term that would describe the work itself.
Right.
The work itself is really just part of what accountants do every day. Is to gather this information, put it in a form that non-accountants can read and understand, to provide to both the decision makers as well as people who may be impacted by the decision.
Right.
I can't think of any language that I've heard to describe that. I suppose, part of the question might become in those circumstances, whether or not you have some sort of moral obligation as the accountant, to participate or not participate in this endeavor. Very similar to, if I have someone who is in the marijuana business, as a lawyer, I certainly believe in this country that everybody is entitled to representation, professional representation.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't necessarily have a problem providing that representation because that's what my responsibility is as a lawyer or as an accountant. But then the question becomes, morally, do you want to be involved or not?
Right.
Not can you do it, but should you do it? And that's a question that I suppose every professional sort of has to answer for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
As to, whether or not you want to be involved or should you be involved. I guess it depends on what you see as more important. The idea that everyone is entitled to this representation, or the subject matter of what these clients of yours sort of engage in. And so that's always a difficult choice to make.
I doubt. Yeah,
But it's often a personal choice.
I definitely believe that. So it's like, for me, the term necessarily wouldn't even apply right then and there. It's just kind of like generally what an accountant is doing. It's just kind of like factoring in that in comparison to like just one specific step in that way. Like that, at least to how it is I explained it to you.
Yes. So, for instance, as the CEO of the organization, you would rely on the accountant and the lawyer and maybe human resources folks to give you information so that you could then decide what to do. Because ultimately, as the leader, you have to make the decision.
Oh, yeah.
Are we going to do it or not? But you're getting this information from the accountants, and the accountants are letting you know that these are the financial consequences to what you do. This may happen, it may not happen, there may be an 80% chance that it happens. And so as the leader, you have to sort of get all that information from the accountants and from the other professionals, and then you as the leader decide, we're going to do this or we're not going to do this. But ultimately, you're using that information from those professionals to make that call as the leader.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I do appreciate having multiple inputs into certain things, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, because as the leader, you literally have to wear multiple hats, right? You got operations that you're having to deal with. You got financial issues. You got legal issues. You got employee issues. I mean, all these things are happening, and you're the decision maker, but you can't make decisions if you don't have reliable information. Right?
Yeah.
So you got to get these people to give you some reliable information so that you can then decide what's the best course of action for the organization.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I doubt. I mean, thank you. That kind of covers a lot for me. For the most part, I was asking him. I'm like, is there like a labor union specifically for accountants, so they kind of have that sense of security, or?
Yeah, it's not quite a labor union, but there's this organization called, in fact, there are two organizations. There's one called the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and then here in Colorado, there's the Colorado Society of CPAs.
Mm.
And those organizations provide resources to help accountants sort of think through these decisions, think through their communications with CEOs and other leaders, to make sure. And then there's a group or there's a set of standards that all accountants have to adhere to
Right.
as they are doing their work, to make sure that when they do communicate with leaders, that they're doing so in an appropriate manner.
Right.
And so they should be following the standards that every accountant has to follow. And the AICPA and the Colorado Society provide resources so that accountants can sort of think these decisions through, and can also make sure that they're following the rules.
Right. But by chance, could you write that down for me? That not the Colorado one, but the.
Yeah, let me.
I mean, I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Oh, of course. It is always fun to talk about accounting and talk about professional responsibility. I mean, I think those are certainly important, and all of our faculty, I think, really sort of pride themselves on. Sort of pride themselves on different areas of practice. And so Bill, for instance, you were just talking to Bill, his area is audit and financial accounting. My area is tax.
Oh, yeah.
And so depending on which government agency you're having to report to, the SEC in his case, the IRS in my case, then different sets of rules for different government agencies. And so it's the accountant's job to sort of know what those rules are, and then make sure that you're complying with them. So you want me to write down the two organizations, the AICPA.
Yeah. I figure I'd have a few questions for the.
CPA, and then the Colorado Society is the COCPA. The AICPA is a national organization, and so they have members all over the country. Just about every CPA in the country is a member of the AICPA. The Colorado Society of CPAs is here in Colorado. They're based in Tech Center. So they are in, I guess that's considered Inglewood. But just about every CPA in Colorado and most accounting faculty members in Colorado are also members of the Colorado Society of CPAs. So yeah, both of those organizations provide a lot of resources to accountants to help them and their clients think through these issues.
I'm sure there's bound to be a few there. Some pretty bad head trips here in Colorado, anyway. Well, if anything.
Are you still considering becoming an accountant, or?
It wasn't hard work for me. If anything, I'm kind of getting a lot of pleasure of where it is I am now. But if anything, I guess if I had to really think about financial security, I mean, accounting is probably the one place I'd go For the most part, it's just repetition. It's just being very monotonous and
Yeah, very
and
detail
everything.
oriented. Yeah, yeah, making sure things balance,
Oh yeah.
making sure information is reported accurately. Yeah, yeah, that's the job of an accountant. Counting money. That's what